Out here, the woods don't lie. Every trail tells a story, and we're here to read it. This is the Field Days Podcast, where passion meets habitat. Hosted by Jason Say, whitetail enthusiast and food plot guru. Brought to you by Magnet Outdoors Premium Food Plot Seeds, because big bucks start with a well-planned strategy.
Hello and welcome to the Field Days Podcast. It's crazy, but this is the last podcast of the year. If you know, I do 7 in the spring and 7 in the fall, and this is our 7th podcast here in the fall. And I have a great guest today. I think, Don, you've been on here once before, correct? You've been on my podcast.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we did a podcast together.
Yep. So I have Don Ott. Don Ott's been a friend of mine. He's been with me since the beginning when I started Wired Outdoors, and now with All In, and just a super good friend of mine. And this is a little bit different podcast. I always save the last episode is all about my buck story from last year and about what I'm seeing this year and what my plans are, what my strategies are going to be. And that's why I want to have Don. Don's a guy that I respect very, very much. He hunts different than I do. He's an older guy, but man, don't let it fool you. He hikes back in the state game lands and gets it done on a public land buck every year. And he's just always impressed me with how he can do that and what he does. So we're going to hear his buck story from last year on game lands. We're going to hear my buck story off of one of my new food plots that I planted and how I hunted him a long time, and my documentary coming up with that. So that's the plan, Don. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep, you bet. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break here, say thanks to a couple of our sponsors, and we'll be right back. I am happy to announce a brand new sponsor here at the Field Days Podcast, and it is 12 Point Hunting Blinds. And I've had the privilege of hunting out of these blinds for the last couple of years, and I was on a property consult earlier this year, and I asked my client what he did for a living, and he said he was one of the owners of 12 Point Hunting Blinds, and my eyes lit up, and I said, we need to talk. And we need to talk because these are the best blinds that I have ever hunted out of. They've thought of every little detail, from just the silent technology, the easy access, and I truly believe that their blinds are completely scent proof. I've so many times had deer directly downwind that never smelled us. So I encourage you, check them out, find out for yourself. But again, hands down, best hard-sided hunting blind I've ever hunted out of. For more information on all their blinds, visit 12pointhuntingblinds.com. All right, Don. So we're back, and let's jump right into it. So I guess, before I get in, I just want to do a couple of things up front to tell people. As you know, I started my new food plot seed company, Magnet Outdoors. I want to thank everybody out there for all the support. It's kind of cool. I just put a post yesterday. I'm new to this whole retail side of it, and we're trying to figure out how much you need and inventory and all that. Well, we ran out of our first product here. We haven't run out. We have 4 bags left of Simply Scatter, but it's going to be out of stock here probably by tomorrow or today already. So that was pretty crazy feeling for me to put that out of stock, because you don't know when you go into something like this how well received it's going to be. We only started on July 1. A lot of guys have made their decisions on food plot seed, but pretty cool feeling. I'm pretty excited about it. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody out there for supporting me at Magnet Outdoors. We do have our southern blends. I know you guys in the north. Don, I was just saying here yesterday, in Pennsylvania, we've got an extreme drought going right now. Like it's getting really, really dry with no rain in the forecast. So, there might be some guys that need to reseed, some certain things, if you planted already. I might be one of them. I think we're going to be all right, but you never know. But, those guys in the South, we have our southern blends, Brassica Binge South, Founders South, which is our perennial blend of chicory and clover. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap that up and just want to say thanks to everybody for supporting so much with Magnet Outdoors. We have some really cool things coming in 2026. So be watching for that. And then we have the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza. So again, we're going to be able to take 500 people this year. We've already sold over 100 tickets here in the first couple weeks, just online. And if you're interested, we have a full day. It's, I have Jason Lapardis, who's the CEO of Turkeys for Tomorrow, who's going to be coming up. He's one of the speakers. He's going to be talking habitat improvement, timber stand improvement, everything cover for deer. And then the other part of it will be me talking about food plots, hunting strategy. It's an entire day. We're going to have vendors there that will have their equipment. Coons Engineering, 12-point hunting blinds, Great Plains seed drills are going to be there. So it's going to be an awesome day. If you're a property owner or a lease guy or whatever, you're looking to manage your property, I'd encourage you, visit the website at magnetoutdoors.com, and you can get your tickets there. So that's it. So Don, I want to get into what we came here to talk about today, and I'll start with you. I'll let you, and like I said in the beginning, Don's one of those guys that I just have the utmost respect for. One, he'll get mad at me for saying this. He's a little bit older, but because, of his age and how he goes and what he does and how he year in, year out shoots a Pennsylvania buck way back in the state game lands is so impressive to me. And, so I want to have him on. And I know it's a little different because, most of my listeners are food plot guys and, and they have their own property and all that kind of stuff. But it's a little bit different hunting. And I thought, it'd be cool to bring a different perspective. And so Don's going to tell that story of his buck. And then I'll get into mine from last year, which, I shot on my property and had to end up sitting 60 times for him. But Don, I want to hear about your hunting style and then your buck story from last year.
All right, that should be pretty easy. We'll start with the age thing, though. Don't let the snow on the roof fool you.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty gray, too.
That's all I'm going to say, okay?
Yeah.
I'd like to put this into perspective. Just 29 million acres. The Game Commission has 1.5 million acres of game lands, PA, broken down in the city geographically due to where I reside. I focus mainly on like 4 game lands. 6,133 acres to 9,254. So that's about these bucks. I've been blessed. 53 years hunting game lands. I figured them out.
Hey Don, you're cutting out on. You keep cutting out on me. Is your internet? What internet do they have there? All right, Don. So we had a little bit of technical difficulty there, and I think we got it straightened out. The fun life of living in rural Pennsylvania, right? So Don, we're going to start with you and then we'll get into my buck story, but let's start with your, the way that you hunt, which is a lot different than probably a lot of my listeners and definitely different than I hunt, and, your buck story from last year.
Okay. Yeah, I hunt game lands. I've been hunting for 53 years. I like that point of the game lands being the acreage that they have in PA, so it gives me more of a place to look for deer. I'm able to go, deeper into the mountains. I'm not limited to like access to rural areas and whatever. So with that being stated, I use trail cameras a lot currently, like everyone else, but I put boots on the ground throughout the year. We don't stop hunting when hunting season's over at the end of Christmas and that extended season. We're hunting all year. We have dogs. We shed hunt. So that gives us like a little inventory of what may be left over in the mountains that made it throughout the hunting season. Plus, it gives the dogs a lot of exercise. But when I'm doing that, I'm also looking for that. The core areas, those pressure release points, where these deer go once they've been shot at or where they're pressured, their bedding areas. Of course, the food is a big concern. We have a lot of ag lower, like beneath a lot of our game lands. And these deer this time of the year, they disappeared. And that's right where they went. Once the corn crops gets up and soybean and everything else that's planted, those deer are going there and they're down along waterways, rivers. So currently now, like, I don't worry too much about that. I know at the time of, and like I spend a lot of time in the woods as many days as I can get. I think last year it was 14 sets. And then on the 15th set, and up to that 15th set, I'd only seen 8 deer all season from stand. Yep. 8. That's hard to imagine. Most guys would be like, I'm not even hunting. I lost a lot of hunters that were friends of mine that quit hunting for that reason. Like, there's no deer going. I said, there's deer. It's just now that there's CWD, that has put a crunch on our deer. They've killed a lot of the deer off. Some of the deer are dying off. So that limits like the numbers of deer that we do see. But I don't get too concerned with it because I know it's only a matter of when or a matter of time. It isn't if you're going to, it's when. Now sealing that deal, that's the other side of that story. A lot of times I pass up smaller bucks, inferior bucks. I try to shoot age class. I'm not really looking for that monster trophy rack. Don't get me wrong. One walks up to me, I'm definitely going to stick it. But I hunt for that age because we eat our deer. So I want a bigger deer. And by letting some go by, which is detrimental sometimes, you might have a tag sandwich, because you don't get that many opportunities. At least I don't.
Yeah.
The buck that I harvested, I called it in, like a lot of the bucks that I do shoot. 8:30, 8:45 in the morning, I called, sequenced 3 grunts, bleats. I have a tending grunt that I do. I use a bleat can. It was a matter of like 2 minutes. I looked and it came in behind me. So I wasn't aware of it at first. And all of a sudden, I got squirrels running around me and whatnot. I'd seen 3 deer that morning previous. And I heard something. So I stood up in my stand. And when I turned, it was my only blind spot. Sure enough, here he comes. And he's downwind on a string. So he knew, and they know, they can pinpoint that call. They know exactly where that sound's coming from. Yeah. So I stood up. I got ready, got my arrows and everything knocked. I'm ready to go. He closed the distance from about 45 yards to the 20 in a matter of like 3 seconds. Next thing I know, he turns to go into this thicket. When he turned, that's when I came to full draw. Well, just about that time, he goes straight on his hind feet into a licking branch. And at that point, he's looking, I'm thinking, directly in my face. He's facing me. He's looking straight in that tree. So I'm just standing there waiting. When his feet and hooves hit the floor, that forest floor, he turned to go in that thicket. I stuck him, double lunged him, went through to the far shoulder because the angle he was on. He started plowing ground. He went like 45 yards, and I seen the rack go sideways, and there was like an edge of a ravine there. So I knew he either went off the ravine, which is my luck, or he fell over there. Well, lo and behold, I waited a while. I got down out of the tree, taking off all my heavy clothes. It was a little colder that day, and sure enough, I had a little 6-point basket rack, like 4 inches wide. Walk right in. I'm filming him through my tree stand off my phone. No idea I'm there, So then finally he gets wind of me and he blows out. So I proceed over to look. And when I went to the edge of the cliff, there was just blood double lung. It was everywhere. You could follow it with no problem. When I looked at the edge of the cliff, I didn't see him. So I'm thinking he barrel rolled down off because he was just plowing dirt. It was one of those things where when they come in, them ears are back, he's looking for a fight or he's looking for that doe or that bucket's there, and to watch him make the scrape, do the licking branch, and then be able to stick an arrow in him. Like, you'll never forget that. I've killed so many deer in my life, and I can tell you every step of that way of killing and harvesting those deer. But yeah, so we hunt different, we try to get in deep. Sometimes it doesn't work. I've killed deer within half a mile of the parking lots, but a lot of them I killed 4.5 mile back. So, it's just boots on the ground. It's, knowing the terrain, knowing where your food sources are, knowing where these deer go once they're pressured. And that's the biggest thing. We're not sitting on a specific food source where all the deer are funneling to that food. This food's throughout the whole entire game lands. Now it's spotty because they do a lot of timbering. So that also throws in a wrench to me as to, okay, if they timbered this year and they took out a lot of good oaks, you might not have the mass crop. So you got to find, and that's the ticket, on game land.
Yeah. Now, do you think it all? So I think, if you were given advice, and this is one thing you and I have talked about that you do a lot when you're successful is you mentioned it, a lot of times you're going 4 miles back in, you're packing your clothes and dressing at the stand, or what are you doing when you go that far in? And I know we've talked about that a lot, and I'm like 4 miles, and then you'd shoot one back there, and then you got to drag it out 4 miles, and it's just crazy, but I know you do that a lot, to be successful is you get off the parking lots, right, where all the other guys, and you get back in.
Yeah, that's correct. They know, like I've done one before. We did a show, 6 years ago. They hear you coming in those gravel parking lots. There's a lot of intrusion on these game lands because it's open to the public. So now there's people walking, biking, hiking, as I said before. When we do these 4 miles, even 3 mile, 2 mile, I don't go get gas the night before. I do it the day before. I don't put deodorant on. I don't put scents on my body. I desanitize myself as much as possible. I carry extra clothing. When I get to those standpoints, I'm undressing in the dark. It might be 4:30 in the morning. I go in early. You know, I've met guys in the parking lot at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and they're like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "Well, it is what it is." Sometimes I may go in a direct route, easy access, and turn around and come back 2.5 miles to get in above these deer rather than walking straight up through them to blow them out.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thought to this, but I will dress at my stand site. I'll wipe down, I put everything in a garbage bag, I shove it down in my backpack. You know, I'll spray desanitizer sprays on my backpack, on my clothes once I get there. I don't care what you're doing. When you're walking that far, you're sweating. There's no doubt. No way to be completely scent proof is my point.
No.
So I try to minimize everything else. Like I don't go to the convenience store in the morning on my way to hunt. That way nobody's smoking around me. You know, I'm not in there talking, spending 20 minutes I don't really have, you know.
Yeah.
So I try to minimize all that activity. And it works for me. I mean, that's the way we, you know, and it works.
It's funny when Dawn and Teresa came to hunt with me a couple years ago, and I think we were going out at, I don't know, they were like, what time we get up in the morning? Should we get going by 3? I'm like, no. I go, we're going to roll out about 6:45. And you're like, no way. And I'm like, yeah, we'll be all right, man. But you know, it's just a different kind of hunting, you know, way easier to get into. And, you know, we're not walking 4 miles in and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. It was just funny to me that, you know, they wanted to get in their stands by 4 a.m, but that's just where you hunt. The pressure is different. And I did want to bring up one point, and I wanted to ask you your opinion on this. I know you guys have, you know, you deal with the CWD area, and especially on the game lands, they've really whacked the numbers down, right? Like they've really, I mean, they have a goal of, I mean, it's a crazy goal of how far they want to take the deer herd down. And I know you're not a big fan of it. I don't think so. And we won't get too much into that, but I wanted to ask you, do you think, like where I'm at, we have a lot of deer, right? You've hunted here. We have a high deer density. You know, you drive down the road, you see 20, we have too many deer, but you have a lot of deer. And I've found that like grunting, rattling, those things just aren't as effective, I think, in an area like mine with a high deer density as what they might be in an area like yours. You know, you talk about every buck you have that you've grunted in. Now I grunt deer in and stuff, but it's not crazy like that. Do you think you guys having a much lower deer density, that the bucks are more receptive to grunting and calling? Because I know you talked about that's been really effective for you.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on to date. And it can be ruined. Like guys go out and just call. That's what I'm not telling people. You don't call continuously every day. I let that environment predict to me and where I'm at and what I know is in that area. But I do feel with the CWD, because their goal is 1 deer per square mile. If you think about that, okay, there's been game lands here that, you know, PGC has admitted, you know, they've killed thousands of deer off of them. And yeah, we have less numbers. Like I said, when you set 14 days, and out in 14 days, I may hunt 2 or 3 different game lands. I may hunt 4 or 5 different stand sets, maybe more, and only to see 8 or 9 deer. That's kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
You know, people can say what they want, but I feel twofold. One, the decrease in numbers has definitely helped, like with that calling. And the big thing for everybody is they want to shoot big bucks. We've always had big bucks, but I think the difference was those big bucks bed down and do not move at night. They become nocturnal. So with the lack of numbers, I feel my view is with those lack of numbers is what's creating the harvest of bigger bucks to date. I don't think it's restrictions. I don't think it's letting them like up your way. You got 3 on one side. That doesn't include the brow time. Here, 3 on one side does include the brow time. So yes, you're getting maybe a 1 year older deer, you know, but I think it's due to those lack of numbers, you know, those and fawns. We have a lot of predators. You don't see fawns, you know, you'll see fawns when they're first born, and then they disappear. You'll see those does without their fawns.
Yeah. That was just interesting. I mean, I know nobody, you know, who wants to go sit and see 8 deer in that many days and that many hours of sitting. I was just trying to find this, if there was a silver lining on all of it, was maybe it made those bucks a little bit more receptive to calls, because a little bit more competition, right? You know, where I'm at, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, it's been a long time I've grunted in a big buck, but he's never come into where I can shoot him. He just comes in and look, he's really smart and looks, I always get those 2.5-year-olds that, that might run in, but it's
Right.
just, grunting and rattling just in my areas. And I don't think is effective in some, I've been to other states where, yeah, you see a big mature buck and you hit that grunt, man, he's turning, he's coming, like he's ready to go. But, where I'm at with so many deer, I just don't think it's effective. So I was wondering that, but, we'll move on from that. But the one last thing I wanted to end up with on this, and if you can give people advice, because we do, like, I just had a guy here yesterday who he has his own property, has a smaller place, and he was here talking to me about his property. It's like 30 acres. But he hunts a lot of game lands. He does both, and I know I have a lot of guys that listen to me that do both, that hunt private and public. If you're giving advice to anybody on public, what's your advice? What's your main key takeaways that you would tell guys to do, when it comes to hunting public land?
Well, I think the biggest thing there is, knowing the terrain, knowing your environment, so definitely getting out and finding where these bucks may be, or at least these corridors they travel. Be as scent free as possible. There's thermals are changing constantly in the mountains. So it's like I said, that's one component. The other factor is don't give up. I hate to see losing hunting public, even though that can be a troublesome thing for us on game lands because, 2 years ago, I killed a big buck. I moved 4 times that morning to avoid hunters that moved in on me on the 4th time. But I always go in the woods with A, B, X, Y, and Z. I need to know if I get intruded by a hunter or something happened to the stand. You never know when you walk in there in the dark. So I always have plans A, B, X, Y, and Z. I'll move.
Yeah.
I don't hesitate for 1 minute,
Yeah.
And that would be the advice I can give to people. Like I tell guys out there during archery season, the guy's 300, 200 yards, you're on public ground. You can't say nothing about it anyway. But if they're that far away, I don't get too concerned. But when a guy comes in and crawls up your tree stand and sits in front of you, then there's issues. And it happens to me.
Yeah.
My biggest advice would be, stick with the grind because it is a grind. Don't get discouraged. Try to be as scent free as possible. Try to know your terrain as much as possible, and just keep at it. Don't give up. I'm 65. I'll turn 65 here in September, and I have to be doing this for another 65.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think one thing you'd say too, and you mentioned on earlier that I think is a real key with your success is, you don't wait till September to do your scouting. You're doing it the year before. You're finding, in the winter in January and February and March or whatever, you're finding those travel corridors, things that you missed where those deer are moving and making mental notes for things. You tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that's a big part of your success as well.
That is a huge part of it. And the other part of it would be just that I love to still hunt, and I will still hunt with my bow. And I hunt a lot off the ground.
Yeah.
What I found, the least I can disturb an area, the better off I am. So if I crawl in a treetop or what have you. But with that being stated, once again, back to the calling part of it, I blind call. I hunt waterfowl. I hunt turkey. I blind call. A lot of guys say I won't blind call. But back to what you had stated, a lot of times when I see that buck, and usually the ones that I scare or might turn and go the other way are an inferior deer, I wasn't going to shoot them anyway. So I don't call to them for that reason. Why do I want to bring that buck in there other than the fact that there may be a bigger one following him or what have you? But if he comes in and blows out, you ruined your hunt anyway. So that's a big key to it. So when I blind call, they're looking. So they're coming to see where that doe is, possibly what that buck's doing, if he's with the doe, because that's what he assumes when they hear those calls together. So that gives you a little different scenario from what you depicted from your area.
Yeah.
So it all works. You just gotta stick with it.
Yeah. So before we move on to my buck story from last year, you got any bucks on the hit list? You finding any that are piquing your curiosity?
Yeah, we have 3 really good bucks. But like I said, I had them early. They disappeared. There's a lot of private ground down off these game lands on both sides of the mountains we hunt. On all the game lands, there's private places, and they go there a lot of times. But when that rut comes, that magical window from the end of October till the end of archery, there's a period in there where sooner or later you may not be in a peak rut, but you're going to see rut activity. And that's when these deer, especially in our environment now, because of the lack of numbers, I still feel that's the big reason. These bucks are traveling in the daytime and longer distances, which gives you as a hunter a better chance of harvesting wild.
Yeah. I'd tell a guy, and I'll just be straightforward. You know, for me, if I don't shoot one the first week of season here, I start to freak out because I know it's going to be a grind for me, and I'm going to get in and talk about my story. You know, maybe I'll wait and talk about that, but I do think that's a big difference. I'm almost getting to the point, like, you know what, maybe I should hunt my property, my private property in the early season, and in the rut, go hunt somewhere with less deer numbers, because man, it gets to be a grind in the rut for me. And you know, I'm going to talk about that story. You know, I just feel like, man, when you got a lot of deer in a particular area, those big mature bucks, you know, they're going to find a doe, and they're going to go from one thicket to the next. And you're not going to see them for days and days and days, because they just don't have to move to find another doe. You know, there's so many does, but where you're at, you know, they got to move a little bit more. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting, the differences and stuff. But yeah, Don, that's it's awesome. And like I said, like, I've always admired what you do. And, you know, you tell me stories and I sit there and shake my head. I'm like, I don't know how, you know, like, this guy came in and put a stand 10 feet from you. And I'm just like, man, I'd be ready to jump out of a tree and wring somebody's neck, you know, if somebody did it. And you're like, it's just what we deal with, you know. And I was like, I don't know how you do it. But every year, you know, you end up dragging one out of the woods, out of the state game lands, and it's always been extremely, extremely impressive.
Well, I appreciate that. And it is hard, but you got to take it high road. You know, I currently right now, one of my really good stands, I'm surrounded. I put in 2 different stands. I quit for a while putting stands for that reason. You know, I was just hunting solely off the ground, and that really is difficult with a bow, hunting off the ground and killing these mature bucks. But we were getting it done. So I put in 2 stands, and so lo and behold, both those stands, guys come in and put one's 30 yards away, another one's 40 yards away. You know, so that's what you contend with. You know?
Yeah, that's tough, man. I would struggle with that for sure. But anyway, so we're gonna get into my story. Talk a little bit about my season last year. Before we get into that, Don, I just got to take a quick break here. Thank a couple of our sponsors, and we'll be right back. I plant over 30 acres in food plots every single year, and I cannot afford to be losing time with equipment that is not reliable or gets the job done. And I'm proud to have Coons Engineering as my equipment sponsor here at Field Days. Their equipment is built like a tank, from their mower that I can create a new plot to mow my perennial plots, to their cultipackers, to the chisel plow that you see me using all the time that I use with just my quad to break ground and plant new food plots. If you're looking for good quality food plot equipment, I encourage you, check out the very best at KUNZENG.com. All right, Don, we are back. And as you know, the first part of this, we talk public land hunting, which, like I said, I know I have a lot of listeners that they do a combination. They might be a small property owner and have a little bit that they can hunt private, but they're hunting public too. So that's really gonna be cool to have Don come on here and talk about public land hunting, and then I'll, you know, tell his story of his buck, and I'm gonna tell my story of my buck from last year. And I'm really excited. As everybody knows, I've been putting a documentary out each year. You know, this will be the 3rd year. You know, I kind of document my whole season. I used to put out a whole bunch of small videos, right? You know, now, like, I've really kind of concentrated with my deer season of telling the story, the whole story, and it's usually a little bit longer show. You know, like the first documentary was 1 hour and 20 minutes long. The second one, I think, was 25 minutes, and I think the one that coming out this year is like a half hour. You know, it's a 30-minute documentary, but it's going to document, you know, not only it's the story of my whole season, which was starting a food plot seed company and all the hard work that was going into that, and how we were testing everything on the property and all the work that we were doing to make sure that, you know, we created the best possible food plot seed blends that we could. But then getting into, okay, now we have all the seed blends, now we're putting them to work, and, you know, and seeing what the deer like and all that good stuff. And so the documentary really follows along on that whole story. And then my hunting season, and that's what I'm going to get into now. My season was a grind last year. If you follow me the year before, 2 years ago, it took me 70 sits to kill my biggest buck ever in Pennsylvania. I set 70 times trying to kill that deer. Now I hit him the first Monday archery season. He should have been dead, but ended up getting him the third day of rifle season. I'd been put in a lot of work. Then the next year comes around. I shoot one on the first day on the first set and was done. Nice, solid 4.5-year-old, 147-inch, 9-point, just a beautiful, solid Pennsylvania buck. And so we get into this year, Don, and that year before, I only had one shooter on camera that year. I ended up shooting him on the first day, but he was the only shooter buck I had that, like, man, this is the only deer on all the property I have that I'd want to shoot. Last year was different. We had our seed lenses. I was super pumped. We had 4 different bucks that I would shoot, 4 at least 4.5-year-old deer that I would have shot last year. And what I think I ended up doing, screwing up, again, like, I'm a big man, if I can get on them in the first week of season. And so I was just pinballing, right? Like, I was, okay, this one's over here. And then I'd move, and then he'd show up the same night, where I was at the night before, right? And it was just one right after the other, where it's like, oh, crap, and there were 4 of them. There was a real nice 10 that came. He ended up getting shot, but just a beautiful buck. You'll see him in the documentary, just a stud 4.5. I mean, really good buck. And, man, I was after him really hard and at full draw on him once and just couldn't get a shot. And then there was a really nice big 8-point, 4.5-year-old 8-point, and then a gnarly, I think he was an 11-point. He was number 1, and he had a left limp, and then the one I actually ended up shooting was number 3 on the list, and just a really solid 9-point. He ended up scoring 144, 145 inches, and he wasn't real wide, but he was the heaviest. His rack was super, super heavy, super cool buck. But those were the 4 that I was after. And, man, I was just pinballing back and forth. And finally, the 9-point, the number 3 on my list, he kind of, I started to see a pattern with him. And I'm like, okay, but, like, man, I did a post on TikTok and it went viral. There was a day I was in a stand and it shows me walking out, and I had a meeting because everybody gave me heck. It's like, I got to do things too. I can't sit in a stand all day long every day during archery season. So I was in there in the morning and I had to get down because I had a call. Excuse me. I had a call, and I think I got down on the stand at 9:20. Then that buck walked by at 40, like right after I left, right by my stand. And I put it on TikTok, and people were like, oh, you idiot, you should have stayed. No, duh, man. But I had work I had to do. I couldn't sit there every day. It was like a Tuesday or whatever. And anyway, it kind of got personal with that buck. I was kind of like, you know what? Like, this buck is driving me bonkers. I'm just going to focus on him. But the one thing I really noticed with him, especially during the rut, I ended up shooting him the last week of season. He was showing up. I'd get him on camera every 4 days, right? Like, and I don't know. My theory is this, that again, I get to the does. He was locking down. Like, he was locking down with the doe for a few days. And then 4th day, he was up and moving, looking for his next doe, grabbing something quick to eat and moving on. That's my theory. But anyway, so we get into a stand, and, and I call Brian Swite. So this is all in the documentary too. And call Brian. He's like, I think you've been hunting it too much. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to get out of here. I think I had sat there 3 days. Well, boom, I get out of there. Guess where he was at the 4th day? 10 yards. Yeah, 10 yards from my stand, 10 yards. And he was really coming to, everybody's heard me talk about Trifecta. It's my new favorite blend. It was great for the early season, late season. It's oats, it's winter wheat, it's brassicas, and the deer just hammered it. And this is really where I was catching him. Not real pattern, but I couldn't figure it out. But every 4 days, and I sat there 3 days, and I'm like, okay, I'm right. You're hunting it too much. Well, 4th day, boom, there he was. And it's like, oh man, So I made up my mind then. I'm going in here and I'm sitting for 4 days in a row. 4 days, I'm sitting. I'm not moving. I'm gonna sit all day for 4 days. And that's what I did. And Don, I'm going to tell you, by the 3rd day, I was about done. I'm like, you get sick of looking at the same things. It's an old tripod stand that I have. The seat's uncomfortable. My back was twisted and turned. I'm self-filming on this little rail. And I mean, Don, I was like, I'm done. I can't do a 4th day here. And I said to myself, I'm like, no. You said 4 days, go back. And I went and I hunted the morning. I saw a few deer, and I'm like, I can't do another night. I can't I can't do one more night. I'm going to change this. And I'm at home. I'm like, no, you said 4 days, go sit 4 days, stick it out and then change. So sure enough, I'm sitting there, and actually the night was really slow, and it was actually a really busy plot. There was always a lot of deer in there. So at least you were occupied because you were seeing a bunch of deer. But I'd been in there so much, I knew it was probably affecting the movement, and the deer probably come later, things like that. But I'm sitting there and didn't actually see a deer in the afternoon, and it gets maybe 10 minutes before dark, and I look to my right, and I'm like, oh, there he is. Here he comes. I'm like, holy crap, finally. And, I was able to get up, and he goes behind the tree, and he ended up being about 32 yards, and I do that, he was cruising, he wasn't even stopping. He was out looking for a doe, and I gave him the stop. He, took a slight angle towards me, like he stepped to where was that at, and he's looking, and I let it rip, and it was right behind the shoulder, but I'm like, man, that angled back a little bit. So I decided to get out that. I looked at it. It was nice and cold, and I said, I'm not taking a chance of losing this thing. I'm not sure. So I got out. Didn't sleep for a while. I knew he was going to be dead. I knew, but you're still worried. Okay, are we going to find him? Right? How far did he? And so didn't sleep real well. But get up, and I ended up talking to Scott Mook, who's a good friend of mine, has an awesome dog. Actually found a dog earlier in the year for me of a young man, Eli, I had out hunting, and that dog was amazing. Went 500 yards across the stream 2 different times, went right to Eli's deer. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to take a chance on this buck. I think I did all the right things. I think he's going to be laying right down there. I saw him slow down. I think he bedded right in there, but I'm like, I'm not going to take a chance. So we waited 24 hours, and I took a dog in. Sure enough, man, he went 120 yards and was laying right there and was dead. And I was super pumped. And of course, right when we found him, you'll see it in the documentary, big storm blows in, right? Like wind and rain and just dumping it down. And everybody wanted to get the heck out of there, So we ended up taking the deer back to my mom and dad's barn and doing a photo shoot with it there. And it was really kind of cool. But it was, like when you got to work hard for a deer like that, that, when you go back and you're walking 4 miles or, you're setting, it's a different kind of work that I'm doing, but, I counted it 60 different times. I sat that archery season trying to kill a deer, and I passed up really good ones that some people were mad at me about. I put one up, a really nice buck that came out, and it was all I could do not to kill it. I mean, it was a solid, I think 130-inch 9-point, just a good buck. And I was like, and I didn't, and then you're starting to think back like, maybe I made a mistake on that. But how it is, when you put in a lot of work, we put in a lot of time, like the gratification you have after you finally get it done is pretty awesome. So it was a cool story. It was a cool buck. Like I said, the documentary is going to come out September 15th or 16th. It's that Monday. It'll be on Carbon TV for an entire week, and then it'll go to Realtree 365, Waypoint, the All-In Roku channel, the All-In YouTube channel. You'll be able to see it in all those places. But yeah, I mean, the food plots were instrumental. The food plot where I shot him is one where I've shot 3 big bucks now. It's like not even a 1/4 acre plot. It's just nestled up against the thick stuff. The big bucks feel really safe there. I talk about it a lot. It's usually one that I don't like to go into until the rut, but I've killed 2 really big bucks in there in the first week of the season. It's just some place that I've built that, man, they feel really super comfortable in. And it was an awesome hunt. So, that's my story, Don. It was a pretty cool hunt, and I was pumped to put my hands on them.
Yeah, they're always cool hunts. I can't wait to see a documentary, but yeah, it is different where you hunt and hunting over those food plots. But like you said, that sanctuary thickness, that's what those big bucks want, buddy. You know that. Yeah. That's a key even on game lands. If you can find those areas, that's where he's at. Just can't penetrate them. You penetrate them, they're gone.
That's right. Yeah, you got to stay out. You got to hunt them smart, and hunt them at the right times of the year for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those, like I said, shot him on one of my trifecta plots. So it was my first buck. Eli, who Realtree came up to film, he shot a buck on a trifecta plot. But yeah, it was a great season. I know. The title of the documentary is called Nothing to Fear, because I talk about, my wife and I have got to a point where, we were just going through all the financial things we did to get All In going and doing what we did. And we're just finally getting to a point where we're a little bit comfortable, and the investment into the Food Plot Seed Company has been extensive. And it's kind of like, well, here we go again. Right. And that's why I said, kind of the theme of it is nothing to fear. Right. I see people paralyzed by the fear of failing, right? That they're so paralyzed that they're going to fail that they're afraid to try. And I just said, that's kind of the theme of this. I'm never going to be that way. I'm not going to look back on my life. And I failed more times than I can count. I failed 59 times that year trying to kill that buck, right? 59 times I failed before I killed him, right? And do I know if Magnet Outdoors is going to make it? I don't know. I have no idea. I think it is. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think it was going to, but there's a risk, right? And then I just, I said, you can't let the fear of failure, and I tell this to my kids, you can't let the fear of failure paralyze you to the point that you're ever afraid to try, and that's just kind of the whole theme of the documentary and stuff. And it ties it all together. And I think it's a pretty cool story. I think everybody's going to enjoy watching. I put a lot of hard work into laying the footage down all year and making sure it's all there for the story. So I'm excited for people to see it for sure.
Yeah, your last ones were great. I'm sure this one will be, and anybody that hunts, even non-hunters, like you said, your storylines behind these documentaries is a testament to everybody's life. You've got to take those risks. When I hunt, I do things. Teresa's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Don't worry, we're fine. You got to take chances. If I don't call it that buck, what's going to happen? Worst thing.
That's right. And that's one thing. That's one thing I really tried to do in the documentaries as well is to tie in that it's more about life than hunting, right? The overlying message is it doesn't matter. Like I go through it now with my daughter. She's just coaching girls is weird, and she doesn't want to do, like with basketball. She misses a shot and she doesn't want to shoot anymore. And it's like, honey, you're gonna fail more than you succeed. A 40% shooting percentage. But it just paralyzes that fear of, I don't want to fail. I don't want to. And it's like, you can't do that. You can't live your life that way, and whether it's sports or business or just whatever, but that's what I've really tried to do with the documentaries is tie it in that, hey, a housewife who doesn't even like to hunt could sit down and watch that story and be like, what, that's a cool story, and that's what I've tried to do with all the documentaries. And I think hopefully they portray that. And I know everybody really seemed to like the last two, so I hope they like the next one. We sure put a lot of work into it, and I'm excited to unveil it on September 15th for sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. They're always good. Like I said, it's a life story,
Yep. Well, I appreciate it, Don, and and like I said, I always like, I've bragged on Don a lot, but I thought it was a cool way to end the season and talk. I have all different kinds of listeners. I know I have a lot of landowners that listen to me, but I have a lot of guys that listen to me that hunt public and private, right? So we kind of combine that, and there wasn't a better guy I could think of to talk about being successful on public land than Don. I called you Dot. Don Ott. I am so I have the utmost respect for him. I've got to be on numerous hunts with Don too, and he can get after it. He's talking about his hair turning gray and getting a little bit older, but he doesn't have any trouble keeping up. I know that, and it's always fun when we get together. And the older we get, the busier, sometimes seems like it's harder. We call say, okay, we're getting together. We're gonna turkey hunt. We're gonna do this, and so seems like it gets harder and harder sometimes. But man, every time we get together, we have an absolute blast. And I respect Don so much. And Don, again, I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. And back to you with the respect factor, Jason, from day one. We've have been on plenty of good hunts together. There's nothing like it. But that friendship, and you are a friend of mine. I tell everybody that, and that means a lot to me. But I greatly appreciate it. Can't wait for this season. Hopefully we're successful again. Yeah. We'll see what we put on the ground.
Yeah. Good luck to you for sure, Don. I know I'm most likely will get that picture like, hey, hauling them out, I'm kind of thankful. I'm like 2.5 hours away that you're not saying, hey, come find me and help me haul this sucker out. But I would, if I lived beside you, I'd come help you for sure.
I know you would. You ruined me 2 years ago when I came to your place and shot that 8-point,
That's
I'm
right.
like 15 minutes from home,
Yeah. we'll get the 4-wheeler right to him. I think you did drag him because you're like, no, I'm good. I'm like, no, we'll get the 4-wheeler right to him.
Yeah, the drag was like 300 yards compared to, the top of the hill where I could get my truck to it, not 3 miles.
Yeah, but we always have a good time for sure. So yeah, so we're gonna wrap it up here, and I just want to say to everybody, like I said, this is the last one. Thank you all so much for supporting the podcast. Thank you for all those that have bought Magnet Outdoor Seed. I talked about the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza coming up. Make sure you get your tickets for that, and then my documentary, it's coming out here in September. I hope you'll all tune in. There's lots of food plot stuff in it. It kind of tells the whole story. I think, anybody listening to this podcast will really enjoy it. It'll again be on Carbon TV starting on Monday, September 15th. It'll run for a week exclusively on Carbon TV. And then starting the following Monday, it'll go to all the other platforms, Realtree 365, Waypoint TV, the All In Roku channel, and the All In YouTube channel as well. So that's it, Don. We're going to sign off, and good luck hunting. Hey, this is why we do it, right? This is why people are listening to my podcast, because it is that time. Get out there, be safe, putting your stands in, be smart. And I want to wish Don and I want to wish everybody out there a lot of luck this hunting season.
Same to you, Jason. Thanks. Have a good day.